appreciate your patience. It was a little crazy this morning, and I feel like that was emblematic of startup life. So anyways, thanks for your patience. We have some great sponsors that's allowing us to utilize the space and be here today. We've been on a little bit of a crazy road show. So we were in Seattle on Tuesday, Portland yesterday, and now we're in SF. So I'm going to hand it over to the guys from K&L who's offering us our space today, and then JP Morgan also, who's been really great partners for us. So I'll leave it up to you.
Super, thanks. Hello, welcome. Welcome to the K&L Gates, San Francisco. I'm Jason Putnam-Gordon. I'm a partner in our emerging growth and venture capital practice group, which means that I work with startups from their form to scale and exit, and with investors as they deploy capital into those startups. My partner, Mike Gourley, is here. I'll let you tell him a little bit about yourself, Mike.
Sure, yeah. Same. So I'm a startup lawyer. I've been practicing 21 years. I've been at K&L for 30 days. Ish. Super stoked to be here. Amazing platform, and looking forward to leveraging the firm's kind of global capabilities to build out my practice. I work with companies, same as Jason, from formation through exit, and all of the day-to-day general counsel stuff in between.
And in a number of verticals too, right? Everything from consumer goods to
I mean, I don't think this is a vertical my practice doesn't touch. I mean, it's medical devices, software, and blockchain, crypto, pretty much across the board. So, and welcome in.
So to keep it short and concise, because no one's come here to hear me speak today, K&L Gates is a global law firm. So we're fully integrated. We've got 50 offices across 5 continents with nearly 2,000 attorneys. So as you grow and scale, we can work with you, which is pretty awesome. The other things, we've got deep history in venture and tech, so everything from Starbucks to Microsoft, Gates, is within our wheelhouse in history. It's pretty ripe. And with that in mind, I'll turn back to Chris or maybe JP Morgan. We want to just thank you all for coming and thank JP Morgan and Chris at Mucker Capital.
For sure. Awesome. You want to step up and give us a quick?
Yeah. Hi. Thanks so much, Chris.
Of course, yeah.
My name's Erin. We've got Myra and Amber here from our Innovation Economy team. So our team focuses on working with startups at JP Morgan. We support from pre-seed all the way through to IPO. So if anyone's interested in learning more, we're happy to chat, but excited to hear from these amazing entrepreneurs. So thanks so much for letting us be a part of the roundtable today.
Awesome. Thanks. And so on that note, we have a great panel today. I'm just going to have you guys go around the table and introduce yourselves. I did a little bit of background on all you guys, so really strong pedigree of background here. But we'll start off with you.
Sure. So Adnan, one of the founders and CEO at Luma Health. I'm a San Francisco Bay native, so this is home. Caught it on a really, really nice day. But I'm a biologist by background, so I have no business running a software company. But Luma is a vertical SaaS company, so software that is meant to really orchestrate the entire customer journey for all of us who are patients at some point in our life. And so our customers are the actual healthcare delivery organizations, so think big hospitals, health systems, clinics, and they all have electronic health records, they have fax machines, they have all these clunky things. We sit on top and automate the entire flow. So you're having a conversation with us over simple text. You don't know it's us, but it powers all of your scheduling, rescheduling, guiding, communicating, bill pay, questions, all of the good stuff.
I'm Travis from Vouch Insurance. We're an insurance company for the technology industry. So we're there for companies from company formation when you're getting set up with general liability to, when you're Series C and you have that CFO making sure you've got D&O cyber insurance right, to when that maybe your medical robot accidentally hurts somebody or you get hacked and we pay the bills for K&L Gates to solve the problem. So that's Vouch.
Hi everyone, Don Muir, CEO and co-founder of ARC Technologies. We're a software, commercial banking, and growth capital platform. So in one place, you can access everyday banking needs, high yield treasury, both with 2 of the world's largest bank partners. And then in the same app, you can access non-dilutive growth capital through a proprietary debt marketplace, both bank and non-bank on the buy side. So great to be back in San Francisco, where we have our headquarters here in Soma, and see some friendly faces around the table. So thanks for having us.
I'm Dave. I'm the co-founder and today chairman of Thirdlove. Thirdlove is a women's direct-to-consumer intimate apparel brand, modern women's Victoria's Secret. We started the brand 10 years ago, and my wife and I in our living room I kind of thought it was I was in venture at a VC firm before, thought it was a relatively crazy idea, but the market had a lot of white space and women were generally unhappy with the existing players out there. And we got started building, and today we're sort of a later stage brand with retail, some wholesale relationships, department stores, et cetera. The majority of what we do is online with a bunch of machine learning technology that helps women get fit from the comfort of home. I transitioned to being chairman of the business, my wife being CEO about a year and a half ago, and I'm working on I'm angel investing and working on a new business right now myself.
Hey everyone, I'm Nick, co-founder and CEO of Andromeda Surgical, and I'm a third-time founder, mostly from the medtech space, and teamed up with a co-founder who's also a third-time founder who worked in autonomous vehicles, and we're working on autonomous surgical robots. So kind of a combination of our backgrounds. So some of you might know that a lot of surgery today is done with robots, so it's been kind of increasing since the first robots were created in the 90s. And the next generation of that's going to be AI-driven autonomous robots. And so we're the first to try to build that. And we're just about a year old now, so very new.
Hey, I'm Sheng, former CEO and founder of Primer. Actually exited about a year ago, so I've been totally out of the game for a year, but it's been nice to kind of go off and travel. But we built Primer over 8 years, the first deployments of artificial intelligence into Pentagon and US intelligence agencies, deploying large language models on top of classified data, both for analysts and operators. And there's a very interesting journey through all of that. Sort of brought me here, but as I say, I've been out of the game now for a year, and now just starting to think about what's kind of coming next, and excited to kind of chat with these guys.
Cool. On that note, I saw a few of you guys have come from venture, a few of you guys are Stanford alums, a few of you guys have gone through YC. Being in the Bay Area, I'm curious as to, is this home for you guys? Is the ecosystem here as strong as it once was? How do you feel about being in San Francisco or being in the Bay Area, and how is that instrumental or maybe not as much nowadays as part of building your businesses? Feel free to chime in.
I'm biased. I'm from here, so I'll let someone else give a
Yeah,
nuanced perspective.
I don't know. I came out here in 2009, and this was like San Francisco in 2009 was the place like where you'd go if you couldn't afford like Silicon Valley proper. Y Combinator just had its first class at the time. And there was like this was a place, and I think it's always been, it's like a place where you come and build technology. And I don't think it's changed. Like the heart of AI, which is the global sort of like, driver, I think, of the economy at the moment, is in San Francisco. And so like anyone that wants to kind of say it's somewhere else, like you got a pretty high bar to beat on that. Now, like San Francisco is a boom and bust town. Since the gold rush, it booms, it busts. So like it has ups and downs, but it's still the center of the tech universe, 100%.
Yeah, I'd echo that. As a West Coast or an East Coast transplant to San Francisco, I started out working in traditional finance, where I observed a lot of the inefficiencies that we're now set on solving with Arc. But my background was living in New York, and in New York, it's a finance bubble. And I moved out west to go to Stanford Business School, and ended up enrolling in Y Combinator. It's infectious. The entrepreneurial environment here is truly infectious. We made a decision to locate our headquarters here, like I said before, in person in San Francisco, and keep as much of the team and talent here in the Bay Area as possible. And that's allowed us to move really fast and attract really great talent to the team.
Go ahead.
I would just echo everything people said as well. The San Francisco is the place to be. I moved out here in 2010 to join Sequoia. I did VC before starting Thirdlove, and you would think that a company like what we started could be anywhere, and why would it be in San Francisco? There's a few retailers like Gap, but the talent's in LA and New York. That's to some part true, but when you're looking for sort of the best marketers, even the best designers in just apparel, they actually tend to gravitate here, and they're open to moving here. I would also say, from a tech perspective, just the ability to grab coffee with people just something really simple, even if you end up working and building a remote style company, the ability to just quickly and easily grab coffee tomorrow, not scheduled a week or two out when you're going to be in town from some other city, is the best part of living in the Bay Area. So I think that's not going to change.
You got to drink coffee. I got here at 09. I managed to get all through my graduate degree, PhD, with not drinking coffee. Didn't like it, hated it. And then within 6 months here, I was like a coffee addict. So I had to start with mockers. I was like, I can't drink. But everything here is done over coffee because in New York or London or something, it's all done over drinks, right? But here it's you got to be on, right? Because you're going to meet with someone. You got to have the neurons firing.
For what it's worth, I switched to decaf.
Yeah.
I gave up caffeine, but I still love coffee.
Yeah.
I had a slightly different experience. So I was a state school kid from the Midwest that had to kind of fight my way to get a foot in the door out here in the Bay Area. Started off as an analyst at a venture fund and was told explicitly, your job is to build the spreadsheet and the deck, not source deals. But there would be these founders from the Midwest that would come out to raise money and needed someone to grab drinks with that night and commiserate with. And that's how I found all my best investments. So to this day, we just had our first kid and our family's in the Midwest. My wife kind of wants to move back. There's some appeal, but I don't know. SF's kind of coming. We were talking about this earlier. There's a palpable kind of dynamic right now. It's really good to be here.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'd say too that I'm an East Coast transplant also, and have tried to leave the Bay Area on multiple occasions without avail. But it's just the scene is so hard to leave once you get into it, and once you kind of have that network. It's just the best by far. People have tried to make Miami happen or Austin or other places, and they've kind of happened to some extent. But if you want to just get yourself the best talent pool, just the best serendipity, I guess, the coffee meetups and things like that, there's really nowhere else that compares.
It's funny, I was saying this before, I can spend about 2 weeks here, and after that, if I don't leave, I'm starting a company. And then it's and there's nowhere else that's going to happen, right? There's but it's here, it's just there's sort of this energy, and you're almost oh, I've got to start a company. And it's nowhere else, which is there's such a wonderful space to be in. And yeah, but I'm leaving tonight because I
You get in trouble.
Yeah, I brought that up only because, being in Seattle and Portland, each city that we've kind of done these things in has its own flavor. And I just know being back in the Bay Area and that energy, I think it's also a perspective failing forward, and the perspective around failing is learning, which is very different than all these other markets. So speaking on that, curious as you guys have scaled your business, exited businesses, done multiple startups. I've seen a few guys have done, this is not your first rodeo necessarily, but maybe second or third. And in that sense, obviously, you've probably learned a ton from those previous ones. How do you look at failure, and what has been some of those things that maybe the external environment might have considered that was a travesty, but in reality, it was a momentous pivot of a learning? Anybody have anything to share on that?
Yeah, look, I think with all the energy and the buzz and all the things that make San Francisco and Silicon Valley special, there's also just a lot of bullshit, right? Which is we're crushing it, right? You're always crushing it, even though all of us as founders know 99% of the shit out in our company is on fire at the time, right? But when you project, this is real talk, right? But when you're out there, you're projecting we're crushing it. When you're talking to the venture firms, you're talking to partners, you're crushing it. But as a founder, failure is part of it. That's what makes creating a company means you're solving a hard problem that no one else has solved, and it takes a diverse set of folks to solve it, and it takes getting punched in the face day in and day out to keep trying to solve it. Because if it was easy, it wouldn't require a company, right? It'd just be a feature that someone else adds. And so with that, I think failure is part of it, and I think for us at Luma, it's a big part of our culture. We talk about smart risk taking. And a big part of my job, we're 200 people now, so it's a little different. But even when we're 10 people, it's my job is to make sure people take smart risks. And it's easy to celebrate the wins, you land a customer, you launch a new product, you do something amazing. That's easy to celebrate. But there's times when shit blows up in our face spectacularly. We have to make sure we celebrate that shit blowing up in our face spectacularly, because that was the right risk to take. We learned something incredibly valuable, and behind crushing it, it's figuring out what works, doing more of what works, and doing less of what doesn't.
I mean, that's honestly like maybe the hardest part of my job is half our company comes from the insurance world, where you know you are inherently risk averse.
Yeah.
And so that
Same is true in healthcare. Like providers are trained to be risk averse.
totally.
Yeah.
So but I think getting that cultural dynamic right is
Totally.
kind of like the secret sauce.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm not a serial entrepreneur, but sometimes I feel like I am. We spun up multiple products, 0 to 1, 1 to 5, and 1 to 10. 3 different times in the platform. Pivoted a few times, especially early on, and I was laughing with my co-founder just last night. We had our capital team on site in San Francisco on Monday and Tuesday of this week. We're reflecting back on the journey to get to where we are today, and all the pain we went through early on, kind of running in circles without pre-product market fit and the 0 to 1 days in the first product. And we were discussing if only we had started where we are today. But when reflecting on it, what we quickly realized was if we started where we were today, we wouldn't have gotten to where we are today. We wouldn't have uncovered the market opportunities, wouldn't have understood the customer at the depth that we do. So it's really those failures and the ability to be resilient, keep your head up and keep pushing and stay optimistic in front of your team and the investors if necessary. To get to that outcome. And by the way, we're not out of the woods yet. We're never going to stop innovating and pushing the ball forward, finding new surface areas. So.
Yeah, in my experience, you learn a lot more from failure than from success. You always hear these stories of people that have had these huge exits and done really well. But a lot more common is the failure. I mean, even though the people that succeeded, as some people have been saying that have gone through a lot of failures along the way. I mean, not necessarily existential failures, but big enough where it really scares you that things are going down the tubes, multiple times through the lifespan of a company. And then, I mean, I think getting that perspective, having been a multiple-time founder, you start to realize that not everybody is crushing it, that failure is kind of part of the way that it goes, and you expect that it's going to come, and you become a little bit more zen about dealing with it. But yeah, it's something that I think it takes time to get used to, and it's something that it will make you stronger in the end, even if it does kill you with one company, that it'll make you stronger with the next company.
I'm just curious in our audience here. Raise your hand if you're a founder. Okay, so more than half. And of the founders, and us too, raise your hand if you're doing really well right now. No, it's okay. That's awesome.
I'm cash flow.
Let's go.
Nobody up here raised their hands.
You can
and it wasn't a
raise your
trick
hand.
question.
You can.
I'm
yeah.
wrong, yeah.
Oh yeah, you're fucking killing it.
I think the thing.
You sold your company.
Yeah. What it's funny, like a lot of I think the story of founders like there's this kind of like in your mind there's this coupling between how good I am and how good the results are, right? Or how good my team is and how good the results. Like yes, there is, but there's also at least half of it is flip a coin. And you go through this and spend enough time in the space, and you will see that randomness, and that randomness will come from places you never would have predicted, you couldn't have covered, you couldn't do. There'll be things that go through that, and that's probably the hardest bit to sort of internalize, because you can do everything right, and that coin comes up the wrong way. You can do a whole lot of things wrong, and the coin comes up the right way, and of course you never tell yourself the story. Oh, I got lucky, right? Because you're like, well, there's still this bit that I did, right? And I did all that. Yeah, that's cool. But there's this other bit that's luck. And it's a hard narrative to hold, I think, that you can go through and spend 8 years of your life, 10 years of your life, whatever that is, and have a whole bunch of key things decided for better or worse by luck. And of course, if you're on the right side of that luck, you're like, I'm really good, right? Look at me, right? I'm not going to ascribe any luck. On the other side, if you get unlucky, you might start saying, well, there's luck here. And everyone's like, yeah, sure, there's luck, yeah, right? You're just not as good. So I think this kind of like failure mode, we talk about failing, but I think we also have to talk about gambling, right? And we say, you got to take bets. You put that in the casino, it's like, you got to take bets. It's like, yeah, I'm going to go on red, right? Like we're sort of in a place, which is sort of what makes it addictive, is that you're playing really high stakes poker on a bunch of things that you sort of control, but kind of don't. And, I think the more founders that sort of acknowledge the role that luck plays in the game that they're playing, I think is important. I think the second bit, It's what I call founder therapy, where you get around with a bunch of other founders and you're all kind of like talking like all the shit that's going wrong. And you're like, oh, it's not just me. Because the first time you play this thing, you're like, everyone's doing really well. And then, or you go now on board.
You assume people
You assume, right? Because you only hear the stuff.
Yeah.
And so like spending time with other founders and hearing about all the things that aren't working, like is almost essential for sanity, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that Sean brings a good point around luck. Like, as a biologist, we always say, like, I'd rather be lucky than smart, right? It's better that way. And then, like, as someone who's super data driven, if you make a risk-adjusted decision tree, you should not start a company. It is not the path to success. So you kind of have to just want to be a little bit crazy. And
have a gambling problem.
And have a gambling problem.
One of the, per the earlier point I was talking about, in YPO, one of the forums, everybody gets to name their own forum. Your forum is 7 people that get together, and there's multiple forums within a chapter. And one of the forums is Sell the Fucker, STF, because it's so it's just like when you're in the midst of it, you're just like, get me the fuck out of this thing, sell it, do what this smart man over here did. And then of course everyone goes back to the well and does it again. But there is this mentality. I mean, the good times are great and the low times are really hard, really, really tough. And which is why I think that YPO is a great example, and there's other groups that do things that are similar. The majority of people that I hang out with, despite being a former VC, are all founders. And I'm totally honest about how things are going. And it's really helpful. I think it's helpful just to be like, yeah, stuff sucks right now. Business was terrible in Q1. Like, you can just be honest about stuff and, not have to sugarcoat things. In front of VCs, you're kind of always killing it.
But it's even too like that should be also the role set up of your governance and your board. But so much of startups, your board is investors. And so every month you're kind of like going in with a sort of pseudo investor pitch, like rather than sitting down with a functioning kind of governance structure, which says like, here's the things that are not working, here are the things that are tough, here's the things that are off. And so it's kind of like, I think the sort of the founder networks that you create become a sort of take some of the roles of that board thing where you can actually talk openly and honestly about the things that are working badly versus kind of like, the sort of the investor-led kind of board reporting, which is just at best it becomes a sort of a status update, but never really a problem-solving space.
I find that you're always sugarcoating those things, though.
Yeah,
too.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you should have a relationship with people where you're being honest on the board and you're talking about your failures and what we're doing better, but like you're always putting it into a lens of maybe this person's going to put more money into us, or we need to make sure they like us if things are tough, if you're cash flow positive. We are too. But when you are, like, at the same time, like, we're cash flow positive, we don't need to rely on anybody's money anymore. But I don't think we're still, like, totally candid about our problems, because maybe we need to raise more money in the future, or maybe they'll come to us preemptively. I don't know.
Well, like, my perspective on this has changed so much since I remember being an investor in the boardroom, and it was funny, after the fact, one of the founders that I was working with told me, like, yeah, like, all the ideas you guys had, I would just, like, nod along and never actually do anything about it. But, I'm very lucky to have a couple investors on the board that I, like, deeply trust and have been involved from day one. And to your point, it's not the same as, like, if they were really in the business.
Are they seeds? They're seed investors, though?
Yeah, they, like, basically helped incubate the company.
Yeah, so that's different.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And
those are great. Those are great.
Hugely helpful. But it's when they say it's like you're getting into like a 10, 15-year marriage, that's very real.
Which you don't realize, I think the first time you start, like your first company, you don't realize, like, when you sign that term sheet, you're like, oh yeah, like I'll go with this, you're like, no, I'm going to have a relationship with this investor for 10 years. Like, and I'm going to spend so much time with this person. So the second time you do it, you get very picky.
It's like saying I'm picking a spouse because they threw an extra goat into the deal.
That's right,
yeah.
Wait,
A goat that doesn't spit at you.
Yeah.
all that's to say, I don't know many entrepreneurs that would raise their hand and say yes, to that question. I feel like part of the journey, I mean, there's obviously lots of troughs, but you just keep setting the bar higher as well. And so you made an
You're
interesting...
never satisfied.
Exactly, you're never satisfied. And so,
But
with
that
that
becomes-
construct, until you exit or
But that becomes a
IPO,
problem. Like, one of the things you start realizing is you get all these wins, and it keeps you like amused for about 10 seconds. You're like, oh, cool, where is someone stealing it?
which is why you made a really astute
Right.
point that shouldn't be missed. You got to celebrate your wins. And I encourage this to my team all the time.
You say that to yourself, like, this time I'm going to celebrate that. And you get it for like, I'm going to celebrate. It's like, but I don't feel that happy
Split second.
about
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because I'm into the next thing. I've already sort of internalized.
Or there's some other problem that brings you down.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Gambling-
and-
that's a gambling
yeah.
component.
Yeah.
So we're all degenerates, is what you're
Well, you sort of have to be though, because you're going all in on stuff that you would never do, and so you've got to have this sort of thing that's slightly off, right? Where you're looking at the stuff, and like your win keeps you satisfied for about like a minute, and then you're on like, what's the next bet that I've got to make, and go through it. So I think there is this sort of space of like, how do you bring more balance into that? But by the same token, it's like, well, if you want to balance, you probably wouldn't do this.
I think both for wins and for tougher times, having these founder communities, other founders to go to, not just a board, is as much as you want to be transparent with your board, you're always a little bit guarded around them. But I know a lot of people here in YC or StartX communities or other founder communities, having people that you can go to and that you trust, you can share the wins and get encouragement from them, or when you're struggling, have them kind of pick you up. It's just I don't think I would still be a founder this third time if I didn't have people like that to go to.
Totally.
And, either way to help out.
A couple of you guys have been in the venture side of things before. How's your perspective shift or evolved now as a founder, being in the weeds and still looking at doing angel investments and things like that? Has that changed the way that you look at investing?
Who wants to start?
I mean, I don't know if it's changed the way I look at investing. I mean, I would say probably I'm a worse investor now.
Why?
I think because you just know how hard it is. I was telling somebody outside, they asked me about what kind of companies I invest in, and it's almost always companies that are completely outside of what I do, either with my new company or prior one. It's the devil you know. I was like, I would never invest in a retail company. What a stupid fucking idea. Like, it is so hard to build a business in this category, in e-commerce, and there's so many different things you have to move. And you'd say the same thing about AI or whatever the thing, surgical stuff. I mean, it's so difficult. So it's, I think when you're unbiased and you're sort of you get really good at pattern recognition as an investor because it's all you do all day long. Look at pitch decks. You become a pretty good investor and an expert in that category. I would say that also I have a lot more empathy now for how difficult it is being a founder. I don't think that I would want to go back in the future to being a full-time investor. To me, it seems boring. No offense to anybody in the audience. But I just rather build stuff and work with teams. Being a VC is a solo job for the most part. VCs will, I don't really care if I offend anybody. I probably offend people more often than I should. VCs is a solo job. They'll try to tell you that it's not, or we're team-oriented, or like, we have a team approach at our firm. That's bullshit. Like, the main job is you are out in the world sourcing deals, looking at deals out yourself. Maybe if you work at a larger firm, you pitch it internally, you all work on it together, you all try to get the founder to like you, take him to dinner or whatever, but like, it is a solo job. And if you like working with other people, and you like hiring people, and you like you get satisfaction out of building somebody's career, as I think everybody does, that's just not your job. I mean, the only thing you manage in VC is your assistant in Excel. So, no offense.
Yeah, I found it also makes you more critical about companies you look at. Where, I think I used to always try to see the best in founders and companies, and so when I'd heard about a new idea or a new company, I would be super excited and say, "Oh, this could be huge. This is gonna do great." And then when you're looking at it from an investor lens, you're looking for why it's gonna fail. And
yeah, that's a great point.
It's been tough to, you mentioned in all these different spaces. In medtech is really tough, and it hasn't produced great returns overall. And so I found myself turning into a medtech VC of like, I don't want to invest in any medtech companies because of just all the challenges I've seen firsthand. Though I found the upside of that is that it allows you to step outside of yourself and your company and look at yourself more critically and kind of maybe see more potential failure modes that you wouldn't see when you're stuck in the day-to-day.
Yeah, Nick, that's a great point, because being a VC is literally a glass is half empty job. Like, every single pitch you go into, you start off with, what are all the reasons why I shouldn't invest? Like, your entire day is spent thinking about why something is wrong, and you just keep knocking chips off until you eventually get down to, we're going to back out of this because you can't, your filter, you get so many things in, you only invest in so much. So everything that starts off through a good referral as being something that is investable, obviously, if you're taking the time to have a meeting.
There's this whole debate on Twitter right now about like, should you talk to VC associates or not? So as a former VC associate, the job sucked. Like, half of my energy was just spent like managing the partners and their egos and like who's gonna like this deal or not. And like, even if I really liked the company personally, like I was like, there's no chance this is getting through. But I will say, like from my perspective, they can be very helpful, like shepherds and champions. Right, like they know how to get a deal done better than anybody else in that firm.
What's your view on what side do you take on the Twitter debate?
Both. That like you should be talking to both associates and partners.
So if an associate reached out to you, I'm just really interested in your thoughts. If an associate reaches out to you, as they often do before a partner does, if you're early stage, do you take the meeting?
I think I take them. It slightly depends on their approach and like how interested I am by the firm. If it's just like I'm sure you guys have gotten the like cold call outreach, just like smile and dial. Nah, not really. But like if there's actually a unique angle there, and I feel I want to work with that person, yeah, I would.
So if it's a firm that you've never really heard of, you need to raise money in the next couple months. It's a little smile and dial of a email. Hey, I've heard great things about insert company. You guys are doing really cool things in insert 2 different industries, AI and machine learning. Love to find a time to catch up with you.
Probably not, no.
Ignore it?
Although you just said need to raise money in 2 months, so it really depends on how desperate.
Okay, sorry.
How badly do you?
Yeah.
8 months.
Yeah, but like
Would you ignore the email? What do you do?
I mean, I've been in their shoes, so I might like
archive.
tell them, thanks, but no thanks. I think
But shouldn't you keep a stable of, I'm like really conflicted on this. Shouldn't you keep a stable of people you know and like if you don't have a network like most of us do now because you've raised a lot of money, but like you want to develop a network of people you know that you can reach out to when you are ready to raise money.
See, I always felt you got as an investor, you have to have a unique angle, like a unique right to win, right? And so like I think it really depends on like who is that person and what's their angle. Like for me back in the day, it was partly like, hey, I'm the insurtech guy, and I like to help founders from the Midwest. So like if I were to come, in my shoes today, if I were to come across me 10 years ago, like yeah, I think that checks a couple boxes for me. If they were, an enterprise software investor that like wanted to learn more about insurance, it's probably not the best use of time. Just a little bit of a judgment call.
Depends how compelling their pitch is.
Yeah, but I do think like these big multi-strategy, multi-partner firms where you got to navigate the dynamics. I do think like if I really wanted Sequoia to lead my deal, I mean, how that place works better than I do, but like I think actually actively cultivating the right champion internally might be how I'd go about it.
Yeah, because some firms, Sequoia is actually a good example of a firm, and this might be insightful for people, where everybody's technically a partner. Clearly that's not the case. And I was not, but there are, inside the firm, there are GPs and partners, and the GPs are the ones that really can pull the trigger, and they're the ones, I sat on a board, but like most of the GPs are the ones that sit on more high profile boards. And you do want somebody that is more junior to champion a deal, and they're the ones that typically find it. And so firms like that, where there is an internal process, I think you do want somebody who can write the memo up that likes the deal a lot.
Yeah.
So I think that is a good approach. The thing that I often am struck with for later stage companies, of which we are, and we get these inbounds from the GAs of the world, where they are smile and dial shops with hundreds of associates.
Summit was always like the classic.
Yeah. Summit is real
It
classic.
changes every 6 months because the associate changes.
Yeah, it's true. But like GA and Summit.
I'm saying the name who sends the email, like that person's name.
Oh, right. So, but okay, that's a good example. Like the only way you're going to get to the GP, who is not some guy that's at startup conferences, they're based in New York or wherever, is through the associate. So then, do you answer that email?
No, absolutely not. If you're not the partner, if late stage business, and you want my time, then you have to come and get my time. Because there's fewer of me than there are of you.
For sure.
It sounds like you would answer the email.
I think I would, because I think that if you're going to raise a growth round, or you want to raise money in the next year or so, you need to cultivate the relationship so you can call up GA.
Our Series C lead, to this day, will say, and Adnan never responded to any one of our analysts' email.
Wait, say that again.
So our late stage Series C investors, to this day, when they're like, at their whatever annual event, will say, and Adnan was the guy who never responded to a single one of our associates' email.
Played hard to get, my friend.
I mean, yeah, well, so I mean, like,
But your company was doing really well. I think also like if you're killing
really
it, you're
well,
killing it.
sure,
So,
but like, I mean, I think good companies always get funded. One, are there any VCs in the room? No, okay, good. And you guys are recovering. You're a VC? Sorry, I'm gonna offend you. I think VCs are pieces of shit, honestly. Right? It's a necessary evil. And I think VCs have done a hell of a job marketing in that like they are the way to fund a business. And so there are many different ways to get the capital you need to grow a business. It depends what kind of business you want to build. But whenever I talk to like an early stage founder, I'm always like, what kind of business do you want to build? And if you can tell me with a straight face and your heart of hearts that you want to build $1 billion company, then yeah, maybe there's a set of VCs you should go talk to. But for most people, like they can't answer that question at that stage, and going to a VC is what I'm from here, like I was trained that that's the path. It is not the only path. And we put it off. Like my co-founder, he had been at companies that were funded by Kleiner and Sequoia, and he was like, we got to go do that. I was like, no, like we will do a pre-seed with angel investors who are smart, will be helpful, will be thoughtful. We'll do a seed, and then when we need to and we have to, because we see the business has the growth potential and we need the money, then we'll go to the VCs. And even then, I think you heard some folks say it. It's not the firm. It's not like the name on the billboard. It's like the person who's going to be investing with you, because they're going to be in it with you for 10, 15 years.
And the terms.
And the terms,
Like
absolutely.
there's all the kind of like structures that you want to.
And the money you're raising at that point in time is the most expensive money you're going to raise ever. Right? And that's
I was on the board of a large energy company, and oil had gone very low, and they were talking about one of the competitors, and they said they're doing really badly. I said, well, how do you know? They said they had to sell equity.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh no, we celebrate that. So you kind of realize he was like, you're selling like stakes of your company as you go through it, and we're in this sort of space of like that's the celebration. So I think like how you structure that, who you're taking money from, what the terms are around that, like all of that becomes really, really important. I think as you go through this multiple times, you start realizing, even something as kind of trivial as like who's got blocking rights on a sale becomes extremely important when you're selling a company. And when you go back to when you sign the thing, you're like, did I give that enough thought? Right? And the answer is like, no, you're not really. So like, I think there's a whole lot of stuff within this where you want to get very precise about the terms of your deals. But I would say the Valley and a lot of founders first time, but also venture capital as a class, it's a really unsophisticated class.
Mm-hmm.
I have money, you want equity, good deal. Terms are whatever, it's all the same, right? And that's kind of like, that's maybe putting a little fine picture on it, but like it is not a particularly sophisticated asset class.
And by the way, I mean, this was a contrarian point of view 3 years ago in a zero interest rate environment. And today, I mean, we have thousands of startup customers. Equity is not even remotely as close as attractive today as it was 3 years ago.
Absolutely.
Founders are opening up their eyes and saying, okay, I can be more operationally efficient.
Mm-hmm.
I can fund growth with cash flow or even non-dilutive sources of capital, which is biased for me because that's why I launched our capital markets business. But honestly, we're seeing companies become operationally efficient. They're not as excited to take on 20% dilution, and equity has remained very expensive after a prolonged VC funding drought. So
Absolutely.
I think it's becoming very mainstream, and I'm hearing this every day.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak on that point. When we've
VC.
I mean, also third time founder as well, but I do help source deals.
If it's what you need, it's an important part of the equation, but it's
For
not
sure.
the only part of the equation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
Fentanyl works like
think
that
so.
too, right?
I think so.
Sorry.
From a founder's perspective, I think like there's been a few founders that I've encountered, and I think dilution is a very big thing, and I think it is very important to think about how expensive that is, that capital really is, because I've had a mentor who exited a $1 billion company and owned a fraction of a percentage of it at the end of the day, and the last business he sold to Gusto was the only signature required in the acquisition, and that was his biggest financial exit, right? So I think it's important to think about those things, and I think going to your guys' individual journeys, like with the companies that you're working on now, did you raise capital? Obviously, you didn't start off doing that, but at which point did you decide that that was a necessary path?
Yeah, for us it was a Series A,
Yeah.
right? And we knew we had to, because it was like, if we want to and unlock this type of growth, we're going to have some real capital. But we didn't pick the sexiest VC. And I think one thing you've heard is like the founder communities are tight, so founders won't lie to founders, right? And so the VC will give you like, these are some references you should call, but you got to find the other companies that they didn't give you on their list and call them. And the founder will answer your cold LinkedIn message or cold email, and they'll give you like the good, the bad, the ugly. And we chose the VC, Defina. She's still our investor. She did our Series A. She's been in it for like nearly 10 years now, or I guess in her case 7. But I would pick her again. So I've had good investors and I've had horrible investors. But that reference call, and part of it was also, what was it? And things not in my control. When we raised a Series A, it was a great time to be a digital health company. Like it was like sexy, it was beautiful, this thing's gonna be amazing. When we raised our Series B, there was not a single company in digital health that had gone public. And there was a bunch of ones that were failing, like Practice Fusion and Zoc. It wasn't a good time. I can't control that. But that reference call was critical. Like, this person was in it with me, we were getting sued, I was on 30 days of cash, and they bridged me. And yeah, it cost me something, but they didn't take a pound or 10 pounds of flesh to bridge me. Like, those types of stories you hear from founders, because founders won't lie to each other, that's what lets you know, like, this is someone that I'm gonna be with for the next 10 years.
Yeah, I'd say in the spaces I've been in, which are med tech and now kind of deep tech, the companies you build take years and usually tens of millions or more to get to even to market in most cases. So there's really no choice besides taking, almost always VC funding. And so in that case, it's even more important, I found, to get the right people, where to the extent where I would even give up worse terms. I mean, you get in these spaces, you also get diluted like crazy. You give up lots of ownership, that's going to be a given, and lots of board seats. Because of that, it's even more important to really make sure that you vet the people. I mean, I would next time when we raise our Series A for Andromeda, no question, I'm going to take probably 5 or 10x more time to vet the VC individual, both the firm and the partners that are involved, because it is such a long-term and such a critical relationship. You really, really don't want it to go wrong.
We had to your point on how you capitalize the business really depends on the business model and the market. Like, we had a really weird journey in that sense, in that we were trying to build an insurance company that needed to get credibility from reinsurance markets and regulators to do things really differently. So, for instance, like I remember we went to get our first products approved in the state of New York, they made us take out the IP protection and cap table coverage because they're like, what the heck is this, right? But to even get to that point, we basically overcapitalized the business. Mm-hmm. So we raised $25 million out of the gate when that was a big number back in 2018. And largely just because we needed to be able to show that on the balance sheet to reinsurers and regulators. But then 5 years later, not only did the market turn, but the priorities of the reinsurers flipped entirely. It was, okay, you guys are a real going concern now. We really just care about your profitability and bottom line. Mm-hmm. So like we had to operate like a much scrappier company. Just, it was just a means to an end.
Yeah, same boat as Travis. We raised both debt and equity. Started out as a direct lending business out of the gate, and so I had to raise a sizable warehouse facility to finance the originations because you didn't want to use equity, which is very expensive for those originations. So we originated hundreds of millions of volume in non-dilutive capital out of the gate, and then subsequently shut down that business. But to get the debt facility, we needed to raise equity for the same reason. We needed the credibility. It was part of the reason for joining Y Combinator. But some of these elements, the venture stamp of approval, especially for a pre-product market fit, pre-revenue, pre-customer, pre-team company, it makes a lot of sense. And as a first-time founder, I benefited from a lot of really great mentorship. I think I got somewhat lucky choosing the right partners early on, but they've been extraordinarily valuable going to 0 to 1. So depending on the business model, depending on your ambitions for growth, pre-seed, seed, even Series A capital can make a lot of sense. Once you have product market fit, once you have scaling profitable unit economics against a fixed cost basis, that's the point where I'm seeing a lot of companies at that growth stage really questioning the venture model and saying, well, wait a minute, maybe there's a hybrid or less dilutive structure out there to finance my growth and get me to cash flowing state. in ARC's default alive today, we have no fundraising plan, so including myself, we're thinking about things the same way.
And what does it look like in those earlier parts before you got to Series A, right? Like you and your founder building the business, getting to some semblance of adoption or first few customers. What does that feel like? I mean, versus I think there is somewhat of a masochistic tendency because you're foregoing stability to take a bet, right? What does that journey feel like? And then I'm curious too, to your point, like starting a business and a consumer brand with your wife and coming from venture and then taking that leap of faith into something where you say now it's like be crazy to invest into like a e-commerce brand. What was that like?
Don't call me.
But I mean, those are stories I think that are pretty like interesting, especially for some of these founders out here that are probably still at that stage before they're looking to raise anything.
I mean, I think one of the things is like it's sort of obvious, but the number of co-founders, like is a direct like correlation with the multiple you need to get the same amount of money back out. So if you start a company by yourself and you sell it for $500 million, that's the same return to you as selling a company with 3 co-founders for $1.5 billion. And it stands to reason. Like obviously, if you split equity 3 ways, you need 3 times the outcome. But when you're starting the company, you're sitting there and like that math doesn't quite calculate. Because everyone always talks about it as like, how much did the thing sell for? As a founder, you're like, now, how much did I get, right? And how much do I own? And I think all the time you hear about the outcomes, it's very much from the VC, because the VC doesn't care how much each founder owns, they care how much the result gets. So there's one of the things there is like, when you set up, you want to really kind of say to yourself, do I really need a co-founder, right? At this point, I can hire other people, but do I need? So for me, starting Primer, I was like, second company, I was like, no, I don't need that. I'm going to do this myself. And that was one piece of it. I think the second bit that comes through when you're starting through that is ideally the investors you take at the seed round are ones that can follow on, particularly if you're doing something deep tech orientated, because if you're really doing something deep tech, you're going to need a long amount of time to make it work, and getting people up to speed on something that isn't the hot like technology is an impossibility if you don't have that long relationship. So like the second kind of component is those seed investors, and they stuck with us like all the way through, but like if you can do that with seed investors, they sort of have that sort of almost kind of co-founder dynamic if you can get that right. And then I think the third piece that comes into this is when you're setting that up is kind of this the sense of how do you structure this like environment for yourself as a founder such that you can play this game like for 7 years, right? And that means like what does my life have to look like so that I can keep being at the top of my game for 7 years? And that's I think that the stuff that's the most important foundations, like as you go through this. But the bit I always say when I talk to founders now, I'm like, no one's going to look out for you. And it's like, it's a little bit like, fair enough, like you've done fine on this stuff, but no one looks out for the founder other than the founder, right? And every time I talk to founders, I'm just like, how are you doing? How's your health? How's your, like, how's things? Are you looking out for yourself? Have you put the right terms in there in the documents and the deals to make sure you do okay out of this, right? And you'd be surprised almost how little founders think of themselves in the whole journey, which is sort of weird. But I just think you have to do it for yourself.
As far as co-founders go, I've always had co-founders in all 3 of my companies, and I think I really don't regret any of those choices to have co-founders. In this case, I think, or in any case, you really want to feel like the co-founder, even though it's going to possibly reduce or definitely reduce your eventual outcome, that you want to feel like they're adding expected value to the company, that having this person on your team they're good enough that it's going to bring you a higher probability or higher magnitude of the outcome that makes up for the ownership they have. And I think it's such a stressful and lonely journey to go through building a company, that having someone alongside you that cares as much as you do and is as committed and will fight through all the adversity that you face is just incredibly valuable that I feel like my mental health would have suffered a lot without having that person there.
Although the counter to that, co-founder fights is like one of the major failure modes of companies.
Customers fail.
And that you want to talk about like the relationship with the VC, the relationship with the co-founder is like even, and like the number of co-founders that are still together when a company hits a large liquidity event, it's sort of like down on the single percentage points. Like, not to say that happens all the time, and like, obviously if you've worked well with one, you may want to go in again. But it's something to kind of be very aware of, right? Is you know, you're giving up large part of ownership, and you've got a relationship that's really got to work, but you know, your priors on that are it probably won't, right? So like, there's this dynamic that goes through, and you can always hire people like that are, you know, joining a company without them being a co-founder. So I don't know, you can see which side of that aisle that I'm on. I'm not to say that you shouldn't do it, but I think there's the sort of the default mode is that you have co-founders.
I totally agree. And in this situation, my third company and my co-founder's third company, we were so much more deliberate about making sure this was the right fit. We took, I think, 6 months of meeting up at least once a week and kind of talking about this before we committed to go in. Whereas I think the first company we met up at a meetup.com event and we said, oh, let's go and do it.
100%. Like the first time, like you go and you're like, oh yeah, we should start a company. Yeah, great, cool. I've like known you for like a week, and you're like, oh yeah, like this is something that should have been diligenced, because you sort of at the time you're like, I don't know, it probably won't work. Because you sort of think is like, you know, and then it does, and you're like, oh, I'm stuck with this.
I took a really hard look at making co-founder breakup insurance. Couldn't make the math work.
I love, yeah. I mean,
There's a lot of there's like marriage counseling. They have that for co-founders.
Yeah.
yeah, no, therapy. Like, yeah.
Only in the Bay Area.
Well, you know how like married couples have to plan their date nights? Like my co-founder and I have like a monthly beer, you know? Like, yeah.
But no, it's relationships you have to work on. I mean, it's sort of like, you know, I guess this is sort of the computer scientist kind of being like, people are important. Yeah, they are.
I joke all the time that being a startup lawyer is like being a divorce lawyer. The number of founders being kind of work through, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But Chris, you asked about like those first, like that first early
Just kind of,
days.
yeah, I mean, he kind of.
So first time founder, I wish I had you guys in my ears back when I started. There's 3 of us, 3 founders, and we still like each other.
You're still together?
We're still together.
There you go.
So we're like, you know, we're 10 years in. It was the longest job I've ever had. I'd say those early days, though, honestly, you weren't thinking about that stuff. We're thinking about like, this is a really important problem. I've lived it. You've lived it. Me as a patient, you as a doctor, like, we should go solve this. And it was just the joy of the problem solving that was everything. It was, you know, it was the fuel we needed to do all the things that we're doing. But we had good hygiene in that. Like, we made sure that we still do it every Monday. The 3 founders have their check-in. Every couple months, like when it's like you feel like, hey, something's like up, we need to like get away and go talk about stuff. And we talk about like, we literally write on the board, hey, these are the things I like doing, these are the things I hate doing. And sometimes we would shuffle it. And usually of the 3, I would get most of the shit, but that was okay. Like, that's the job you sign up for when you're the CEO. But like that hygiene was really important. But early on, it was really like, let's get this product in as many real users' hands as quickly as possible. Like that was jet fuel. And I didn't really care what they were paying us. I just wanted them to pay. Like, most of them were some of our friends, right? It was like, hey, you pay me like $20 to use this thing? They're like, yeah, sure. But it was those proof points, the data we got from them, the things that their staff, when they would use, they were like, this is not working. This is like, some of our best products came from quite literally sitting behind the desk, like at a clinic with those early customers. Like one of our best products called like referral automation was one of the staff members who I'd gotten donuts and I would hang out with her for like, you know, hours on end, just sitting behind the desk watching her. She brought a stack of papers out this big. She's like, these are all faxes that I'm going to go through. It'd be really cool. You know that thing you guys do to like automate like scheduling offers of people? Like, could you help me automate this? It's our best product today, right? Like, but that could only happen because the joy was being in the trenches with the customer, knowing that the product was not perfect. It was far from. But it was those real users like breaking it, messing with it, that allowed us to get to where we were going to get to.
If the question's around taking the entrepreneurial lead for a first-time founder,
Sure.
for those of you out there who are starting a company for the first time, also, you know, first-time founder. In my case, you know, like I said, I was working in traditional finance, late-stage private equity. My passion was cross-cap structure, fundamental investing, which maybe the JPMC folks can resonate with. But in any case, so when I went to Stanford, it was to go back to the buy side. I didn't know what entrepreneurship was, or what a revenue multiple was, for that matter. Obviously drank too much of the Kool-Aid, but I signed an offer with a $30 billion fund to go back after my MBA and join this fund. And so my whole second year was, okay, maybe at this point I was a year in, I drank a lot of the Kool-Aid, and I was like, maybe there's something else out there. And so I started testing different theses, but what happened is it really put my feet to the fire, and I had a fuse. I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to commit fully and take away the safety net. In that second year, I found a co-founder who had equal alignment and was facing similar trade-offs. I called up the company that I was meant to join. I said, hey, normally, if you asked me this a year ago, this would have been my dream job, but I'm going to do my own thing. And that really created a sense of urgency in our case that got us off to the races. But it was about removing the safety net and just taking the leap once we had sufficient conviction to get there. And in my case, having the co-founder was really helpful in getting to that decision and working with someone who was facing similar opportunity costs and similar trade-offs to be in it with you from the beginning, especially the first time founder.
Yeah, I think the first time founder going into that, you're almost kind of like, it's that sort of feeling that someone else is with you. Like we're jumping, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're like, yeah, we're right. You both you wouldn't do it if there weren't the other person there, and it's sort of like this kind of, I guess we are. I don't really want to, but I guess we are. And there's that sort of jump where you sort of go into this thing, and it's the second time you're like, all right, now if I jump, well, I've got 7 years of this kind of thing, and all right, what is that going to look like, and who am I going to do it with, and what structure want to be part of, and I understand it will go, right? But I'm the first time it's just like, you're like, oh, this tech is really cool, and I think we can make a company from it. I'll say the other one that comes in, shout out to the lawyers in the room, like the partner at the law firm, it kind of sort of like once that partner is on the thing, like, yeah, here's the docs, you incorporate this, don't worry, we won't charge you until you've got your first founding, your financing and all. That sort of railroads the sort of whole process, and then you're like, I guess we've got a company here. Like the lawyer is that sort of other person who's like at the start of the company is very kind of central, right? And it's sort of, I think one of the benefits of the Valley is there's just some very, very good like firms that are able to come in and partners at those firms that make you feel very comfortable as a first-time founder. Like, you probably wouldn't find that density anywhere else in the world, that people being like, all right, so you don't have any business money, things that, whatever, cool, we'll get that sorted out. And Silicon Valley Bank used to be, the financial instrument of that as well. So we've lost a little bit of that now, but the infrastructure to kind of get all the pieces and go from I've got an idea to I have a company in record time, whilst kind of not really being sure if you ever quite wanted to do it yourself or if you were capable, was just wonderful here in the Valley. And it still is. It still is.
I think it's more normalized here too. Like it seems reasonable to go and start a company, whereas other places, most of the rest of the world, I feel like it seems crazy. I mean, my family back home, it is crazy. my parents, who were academic and a surgeon, were just like, when are you gonna get a real job? Like, a year into my first company, they're like, this is, stop playing around and do something real. So I think just being here, going back to the value of the Bay Area and the community here, it's easier to make the leap.
Cool. On that note, we're done on the hour, so I know you have to take off to go take care of some things, but feel free to do that, and then we'll take any questions if you guys have any questions real quick for any of these founders. But let's give them a round of applause first. Cool.
Yeah, I had a question. Just for early founders, can you just elaborate a little bit more that the current, psychology is that in order to validate my idea, I need to get seed funding from VC, which is not usually the case. So if you're not, I always run my business like a coke dealer. I'm not a coke dealer, but if your product or service doesn't make $100,000, don't incorporate until you reach that milestone. Could you elaborate on how the dynamic is shifting from traditional Silicon Valley to people just bootstrapping their ventures right now, and how early entrepreneurs should just tell themselves that I don't need a VC to validate my idea or service. The revenue that I'm generating should validate that.
As the risk guy, I would highly encourage you to incorporate when you're generating revenue. That's a whole separate conversation. But the point stands. I think the last few years of ZERP capital abundance has kind of broken
Yeah.
things a little bit. I think validate. Like I don't know what else to say.
Nothing's better than paying customers. Like nothing's better than paying customers. But take like the plenty, the abundance of capital and like now the less amount of capital. Like take all that out. Take macroeconomics out. At some point, you should have to know like how much money do I need to unlock this business, right? And then that just depends on your ambition. It depends on your co-founder team. It depends on what like success looks like for you. But depending on like what that goalpost is, sometimes it requires taking venture capital, and oftentimes it doesn't.
It's just because like I was advising some founders at Plug and Play, and their perspective is my main goal is to get seed funding in order to make this operation.
Yeah, that's a
But
poor
they
goal.
don't understand the fiduciary responsibility.
Get a
of those
customer.
investors.
Yeah. Getting funding is like I don't know. I'm sure this is true for all of you. Like getting funding wasn't like a celebratory event.
Exactly.
It was just a milestone onto like to enable what we needed to go do.
The best line someone told me on this was, we congratulated them on a funding round. They're like, I just got the lumber for the house. Like, congratulate me when I've built the fucking house. Like,
Yeah. It's an input.
And whether it's a supply side or demand side piece, what we have seen in the market is that companies are further along in their monetization journey when they're raising seed rounds. That's, we have lots of pre-seed and seed stage companies this year versus as customers, this year versus 2021, early 22, no pre-seed seed stage company had real revenue. Now you look at, the alumni demo day last weekend, and a lot of the companies are generating actual, material ARR. And then, that's why I see across the full cohort of seed companies that are getting funded today, some of them have millions of contractual recurring revenue, and that wasn't the case 3 years ago. And so, I don't know if it's supply side, demand side, maybe some both.
Yeah.
But companies do seem to be more mature today than they were just a few years ago in a zero interest rate environment.
It depends on the space too, right? Like I have friends who are running life science companies. You just need a lot of capital to like just go do what it is you need to do, right? Or just like having access to a lab, right? It's not cheap.
Psychology from early stage founders their psychology is let me first raise my seed so I can validate my product and service.
Yeah.
But that's the main prerogative, right, for these early stage founders. That shouldn't be the case. I think we should talk to a private equity person and let them know that revenue is the key to raising anything at this point, right? But I get what you're saying for like biotech or medical when you're doing the FDA stuff. It's pretty expensive to get to that point. But
Yeah.
but if it's like an early founder, I think their main prerogative should be just to get cash flow positive before raising anything.
Yeah, in bio and med tech and deep tech, I think you do have to go out and usually, unless you can fund it yourself, raise funding from somebody to get things going because it's expensive and it takes a long time. You're not going to get revenue right away. But it's still, even though you're not getting revenue, it's equally important to get the user validation to make sure that it really is something that users want. So even though we're not on the market now, we're out there with users all the time. And it doesn't change the fact that that's the most important validation you can get.
Although, to build on that with the deep tech, it's sort of a lot of stuff is, I think a lot of the VC world is kind of orientated around this kind of like, SaaS B2B kind of like the deep tech of which bio is part of it, some of the robotics, medical is I think it inverts the thing of like, is there the problem is very obvious, that the market is immense. The question then becomes, can it be done? And not just can it be done now, right? In a sort of a 5 to 7 year window. And I think when you're in that space, that's what I think VC money is wonderful for, right? Which is like, there's technology that could exist. It's embryonic. It needs to come into market. If it solves a problem, like it's going to be immense. Like if it solves cancer, like yes, that's a wonderful thing. Can it? And I think that side of it is what the Valley, has its roots in deep technology problems. I think that's what venture capital is wonderful for. I think that's what inspires a lot of founders to come along. And I think we've had a window where there's been, just such profitability in SaaS B2B companies that I think we've forgotten a little bit of this circle. And that's the one that I think actually the system actually works really well for. We can hate on VCs, but no one else is going to give you that sort of, risk, profile to take money against. And, I'm super excited to see more and more of the deep tech coming back into the valley. And, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, that is venture capital.
Yeah.
Like
That's where it's a perfect fit.
That's like the history of it. To your point, I say I was in VC. I was a Series B investor. I needed metrics like that. I was a growth investor. Let's be honest.
So speaking of like co-founder relationships, for first-time founders, how do you split up like equity and decision making based off that like equity split, and how do you like resolve conflicts? I know it's kind of a lot, but just the idea is how you manage decision making with like equity split.
These two guys like that.
Yeah, look, there's no there's not a simple answer there, right? There's no magic formula that says it needs to be a third, or you went first, so you get 40, and the rest, But so I won't comment on that. What I'll comment on, and look, ours are not equal. Like the three of us. Initially, it was two of us. It was me and Tashfeen, and we were 50-50. Like we were college roommates. We like met on campus. He was at Stanford Hospital. I was finishing up business school, and like there was already tremendous trust. Like he knew I wasn't going to screw him. I knew he was never screw me, and we're like, we're going to go solve this problem. But we quickly realized like we're insufficient. We needed a real like product person, and so that was the third founder who joined, and that meant like each of us had to give something to him, and we just did it like easy peasy. I forget the number, but like X percent for me, X percent for the Tashfeen went to Aditya, who was our third founder. There came a point where the Tashfeen, who's a doctor, was like involved less and less on a daily basis, and Aditya and I were essentially running the company, and so we had to have that tough conversation. Which was like, Tashfeen, we have to take from you and give it to Aditya, and he didn't enjoy it. Like nobody wants to give up anything, but we could have that conversation, and we could have that conversation with feelings, but also rationally to be like, hey, like this is the right thing, and it's gonna like our pieces of the pie might change, but the pie is getting bigger here because the three of us are still doing this together. And so I'd say what I take from that, like X years into, is like the regular cadence of communication, of building in time to like have that tough conversation every couple of months. Of like, is this still fun for us? Are we doing what we want to do? Like for each of us, answer that question. And then that also meant like that would often turn into like, okay, we have to rethink the equity structure to line up with not just where we are, but where we're going to go and who's going to be involved in driving that going forward.
Yeah, and it's equity, but it's also who's controlling like the common stock. How does the common stock function on the board? What rights does the common have in the board dynamics? Like, do we all have equal rights as co-founders on that? Like, what happens when two of us agree and one doesn't? Like that governance structure, like you want to encode that as much as possible explicitly and have those open conversations and look at it so that it gets addressed like in concrete forms. Because I think a lot of times you see co-founders in that space, like, if someone disagrees and they have the ability to get rid of the other person,
It happens.
they're probably going to use that.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, if it hadn't been structured like that, then they would, be in a different boat.
Yeah, I'd say with equity split, I'm usually in favor of more even splits. I mean, not necessarily 50-50, but if you're starting out, even if someone's been working on it for 3 months or 6 months, that's such a tiny amount of time in the big scheme of things of how long this is going to take and how much work it's going to take. If you're putting in equal effort over the long term, then having closer to equal splits is usually better. And as far as the like who makes the call, I think it's best if co-founders can kind of talk it out and agree on something together. But then, I mean, someone's got to be the CEO at the end. And so if it's totally a deadlock, then there's got to be somebody that can make the call.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the co-CEO thing work very well unless there were a couple. Like I've seen that work, right? Like spouses created to come together, or it's their second or third venture, right? Like they've done it. So then it's like, yeah, we can be co-CEOs because like this is the third time we're doing it. Like you can already you already have like the muscle memory together.
I also just don't think there's a right answer to this question. I've had it with so many different founders, and you'll hear a different answer every time. I think what's consistent across all conversations, What's consistent across all conversations is transparent, open communication early and often, right? If you can't have that hard conversation at the very beginning and throughout, the 0 to 1 state, you're going to set yourself up for failure. And so be able to have that, lock yourselves in a room and just hash it out and figure it out. Be adults about it. One of my early investors, had this conversation with me very early on. It was great advice. But you're going to have to overcome much bigger problems. And if you can't come to that type of consensus with your equal partner, whatever the split ends up being, then you have bigger problems than the equity split or who's wearing the CEO hat.
Yeah, we just had somebody talk about that yesterday, which was they went on a trip, 1-day excursion trip, and then in nature just had a difficult.
It's very Pacific Northwest of them.
Yeah, sure was. But knocked it all out, right? And I think you probably already know what the answer is. Just doing something that's really uncomfortable, which is the nature of, I think, entrepreneurship in general, right? It's like, you're going to have these tough conversations, and it's just the matter of doing it and creating the infrastructure to do it consistently.
Yeah, bracing the tough conversations is one thing that's so hard to do, but it's so critical. If you put these things off, the cracks that exist will just grow and sometimes become insurmountable before you even realize it. So you've got to kind of jump in and be ready to face challenges head on.
Yeah, I mean, Sean called it out earlier. It was like, companies fail not because they're out of money, but it was a bad idea. It's just the founders just can't coexist at some point.
Yeah.
That's why most companies fail.
Which is why it's just like, I don't know, it was like second time doing this. I was like, well, take that complexity out of it. And yeah, you still have to hire people, but like you've taken one of the kind of the failure modes out of it. It gets a lot more lonely when you're doing it, like yourself, because there is no one else and you feel very alone when you've got that piece of it. But on the upside, you remove a sort of a dynamic that you don't need to navigate as you go through, and you have the exit price that you need to get the same amount of money, which I hate to be capitalist about it, but it's kind of it's nice.
Yeah.
Such a dirty word.
I know.
So the discussion amongst your partners, that's a tough discussion. What happens when the board comes back to you and says, you need to move to a different position? We're going to bring in somebody to take over what you used to do. That idea of the investors coming in and saying, you were the founder, you were the head of the stake, but for the betterment of the company, now you have to move aside. Has anyone dealt with that? I see that every day.
I still have a job, so I haven't dealt with it yet.
Okay.
Our investors will say that the replacing the CEO is a thing that they least want to do.
Yeah.
They will replace other people in the management team and encourage that to happen. But replacing the CEO is like for them something that they would hate to do. And sometimes they have to do it, but like that's not something that they want to do.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if you choose the right investor, they're not telling you what to do. Like we've had, again, good investors and bad investors. The good investors are good investors because they're in it through thick and thin, but most importantly because they trust us to operate the company and just be thought partners when we need them and to stay out of the way when we don't.
It's also a documentation. Like founders never spend enough time looking at like board voting agreements and rights and peace. When they come and say, like, if you've got that dynamic, like it's a very different thing as I'm telling you to leave and I'm asking you if you want to leave, right? And that matters is how you've got things structured. And so again, like, it'll be in, you'll get folks term sheet, what's the brand of the investor and what's the top line price? That's all well and good, but like, what's all the other details that come underneath that? Because you can tell them to go and pound sand if you want, like, provided you control the company, right? But you may not, right?
Right.
And so that side of it, again, it's part of it. The same token, like in public companies, having sat on a board and on public companies, you have succession plans, right? You have a succession plan. You're like, if this person decides that they don't want to be CEO anymore, like what is our plan as a board, right? So you have to have that. The second bit that comes through is you don't expect people in large public companies to run more than 5 years as a CEO. It's just that's sort of the run. Maybe they get 7. So these things happen, and that's perfectly fine. I think the dynamic of it is always like, what's the governance structure that allows this decision to be made and the best value for the shareholders, best value for the company, and best value for the individuals. And again, it all comes back down to governance. And I think we do a terrible job at the Valley of actually spending enough time with governance. And having sat on public company boards, you realize like well-functioning large Fortune 100 boards like put like the Valley's kind of like dynamic of what a board is. It's like Toy Town here.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I bring it up because I'm very frequently brought in to do just that on behalf of the investors.
To fire CEOs.
It's
It's a tough job.
Yeah. So we work
Cool. If I
that
ever
way.
see you coming, ooh.
So-
We need to chat.
Well,
A couple of things.
Yeah.
Over coffee.
Yeah, usually we work with founders directly and not the VCs. But if VC calls and says, this happens so frequently, so this is for those that want to be founders in the room. It's very possible, even though you have an ego, that at some point in time, you will have to make the transition to move out for the growth of the company. It's a very common discussion that happens all the time. And I try to build a relationship with founders, also off the premise that if you don't make it or that happens, we can help you find another opportunity. But it's something I see really frequently, and most founders, when they start a company, never think that, wow, I myself will be moved out by the board.
Yeah, I always say to like CEOs, like you start a company, like it took this out as a single founder. It's all yours. And then the process in the next 7 or 8 years is giving it away. You give away equity, you give away responsibilities, you give away autonomy. Like at the end of it, like at some point, like, you exit. So if you're not comfortable giving away the company, you shouldn't be a CEO. And eventually that will be you, either because someone taps you or you you decide someone else is better or you decide it's time to sell or whatever that is. Like, and so I think we've got this, and part of it is it gets quite like sensitive is because it's handled so badly. But there's absolutely nothing wrong about that. In fact, that is the objective of starting this stuff. Everyone talks about exits. What do they mean by exit is like not doing anything, right? And yet we have this thing where it becomes it becomes terribly managed and quite badly structured because again we don't spend enough time with governance.
Just to add on to that, it's just like I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs get emotional about the exits or getting replaced with someone, but they should be happy about it. Like they don't have to work.
Depending, right? You could be happy about it, yes,
Yeah.
but again, you don't. And it goes back to the stuff as like as a fellow, like no one else is going to look out for you, right? So you got to look out for yourself, which means putting the stuff in place so that you do okay out of different outcomes. And that's whenever I spend time with founders, that's like, I'm like, let's talk about you for a little bit.
I think it depends on what your why is, but like this quote that's been in the back of my head for the last couple of years as we scaled as a business, like your job as a leader, I don't care if you're a founder or a football coach, your job is to build a machine to make yourself replaceable. And you got to just, your job is to build the machine to make yourself replaceable. And that's like mission accomplished.
Can I ask a lawyer question? Being a lawyer, one of the lawyers here, how do you guys view your relationship? How do you advise founders to view their relationships with their attorneys? And does that change from sort of stage to stage? Like I'll just say, like I often tell founders, especially in the early stage, especially first-time founders, don't think of your lawyer as just like a cost center and like someone to be avoided at all costs. You sometimes got to think of them as like a co-founder almost, because you're going to be having really difficult conversations with them about things going wrong that you wish weren't going wrong, but they are going wrong, and you're going to have late night calls and they're down in the trenches with you ideally. And it doesn't always work that way, but I think that's like a healthy kind of lawyer relationship. And I don't know, but there's a whole school of thought out there that lawyers, let's try not to call them unless things are going really bad, and at that point you haven't developed this close relationship, and so it's not as fruitful a conversation as it otherwise might be.
Yeah, I'll go
I
for
was
it.
going to say a couple of things that come in, right? Like the lawyers, that we worked with, like the number of times they get on at like 7:30, 9 o'clock on a Saturday night to get something done and turned and moved. Like that's co-founder stuff, right? Like you've got a life, you've got a thing, you put it on hold to come and help on that. Like, and that because it does actually, sometimes it actually has to happen that evening. And so that piece there of feeling like there's someone in the trenches with you is like so important. That's so partner specific, and it's that relationship. But that's wonderful. I think that's there. I think the second bit is oftentimes just having a conversation with the lawyer saying, look, here's the budget that I want to work towards. Because the thing that people pull back and say, don't talk to lawyers, is because they get a bill and how the hell did I spend $50,000 on like what? And that's because they've never kind of sat back and said, look, if it goes over this price, let's pause and go and talk about where we're at. So just getting really, I think, concrete about budgets that you're working with. And then the final bit, which people overlook, but you go through, the plug for you is like directors and officers insurance. Like at some point you're going to get sued, and lawsuits are incredibly expensive, and your D&O insurance is probably not enough. So like, you know, that's the other bit. And at that point, you're very happy to keep talking to the lawyers because, you know, it's like my insurance will cover it. So like there's different kind of dynamics of that. I think the final bit just for lawyers too is that it's the company's lawyer. It's not your lawyer.
Yep.
And so you also need your lawyer.
Yep.
Right? Because the dynamic of this is the company, you know, you're working with them and it is you and that, but at some point your interests may diverge slightly from the company and you want to have your own kind of counsel.
On that note, 0% of first-time founders get business insurance.
Yeah.
2/3 of repeat founders do. Yeah. But to your point, like, what is it? The most expensive mistake is the cheap lawyer. There's some one-liner like that. It's real. Yeah.
Does your insurance cover clawback clauses as well too?
So this is actually really important. Like, I'll try not to keep the insurance plug short. Business insurance is not a commodity. So like people are used to buying auto insurance and health insurance, and it's like, let me just look at the price. It's all the same. Those terms vary on every policy. So like you actually need to be working with somebody that is like getting you the right thing. Yeah. The other just thing on lawyers, like we're literally insuring litigation. So our GC was our 4th hire, and she's just been such an awesome part. I mean, you know, we've now obviously become close very personally, but I have found like working with, there's 2 kinds of lawyers I've worked with. Those that think their job is to like, you know, say no and protect the company, which in a lot of ways it is. Or those that say, hey, like my job is to figure out how to get to yes. And really put that business hat on of helping you build the right, you know, find the right solutions.
And that's the dynamic too with lawyers is like, to the point, like as a founder, you have to kind of know what risk you're willing to kind of tolerate, because you can't remove all risk from any kind of contracts. He's like, if I take on this, well, all right, I've covered that, but I haven't covered all of these pieces. And I think when you work with a lawyer, just being very like open and saying, here's the spaces where I'm willing to carry risk and here's the spaces where I'm not. And I think otherwise you can have lawyers which, you know, either go through just everything and just get it all buttoned down and it's like, well, now you've got something the other party won't ever agree to, versus kind of like everything is negotiation, so you're going to give some stuff on some and not on others. And, you know, the better the lawyer like understands your risk profile, the better work they'll be able to do for you.
Yeah, as an early stage founder, CEO, you look for opportunities to, you know, save money, cut costs every step of the way. You're cash burning startup, so there's real opportunity cost with spend, and good counsel is insanely expensive. That said, you know, penny wise, like you don't shirk on good counsel. They can, you know, you can save millions between dilution during a financing round, or in our case, I raised a debt facility and I hired, you know, the best debt counsel on the street, and we ended up saving millions at the back end of the facility because we negotiated a term we likely otherwise wouldn't have. So you don't know when it's going to pay out, but invest in good counsel up front and it can save you a lot of money down the road.
But also with good counsel, is just say like, here's the budget that I want you to work towards.
Yeah.
Right?
That's smart.
And like, you know, like the number of times I've seen people just never like have that conversation up front with counsel, and they'll tell you like, oh, well, okay, well, if that, you know, all right, so I don't need to look at everything and all that detail, right? Like, just like I have a budget of $30,000 to kind of get through this kind of like contract structuring, whatever, you know, if it goes over that or we get close to it, let's talk, right? And you know, like, again, it's not rocket science, but like, again, they don't tend to do that.
Yeah, in the past I've used both like one of the premier law firms in the Valley, and then also had kind of a side lawyer that was, I don't know, a quarter of the rate. Yet I found that their work ended up being the same price in the end, because especially when you have a relationship with a lawyer over, I mean, in my case, 3 companies now, same partner, you really learn to work well together, and they kind of have a sense for what you want. They also have probably better expertise that's relevant to your company than the cheap, $300 an hour independent lawyer. And the relationship, I think, I mean, it just has been hugely valuable, even though, I mean, somebody said here that it's the company's lawyer and not yours, but I had a kind of break up with my prior company, and the lawyer that was still the company's lawyer was incredibly supportive through that, which was surprising. I didn't think he would be. And that made it a no-brainer to go to him again the 3rd time.
Awesome. We'll take one last question and then give people some time back. But yeah.
So for context, I work in the federal sector, so I'm working on a social health tech solution, and I'm curious if any of you have worked with like non-traditional models for funding. So I'm reaching a critical mass where we're either going to decide that we build this in the federal sector and we have a lot of, we can tap a lot of those funds, or we're going to pull out and partner with the federal sector, which they've agreed to do. Have any of you ever worked in a situation like that where you're working with like local, smaller federal governments?
I used to work in government, but no, go ahead.
I've done a lot of government grants with mostly NIH and NSF, and it's great. I mean, usually the timelines that those take are so slow that I've always found it was much faster to raise investor funds than, I mean, usually when the grant came in, it was like too little too late. I mean, it helped. It was like 10% on top of our round or something, but it wasn't ever needle moving. I think for some companies though, and this includes in medtech and biotech and deep tech, that a slower kind of leaner path might make sense. And in that case, I think it's a lot better fit. I still apply. We applied for a grant with Andromeda recently, even though we've been, we raised good rounds. I think it does help, and it's basically free money. You do have to also factor in the cost of both putting the grant together and then just the maintenance, which is significant.
Yeah, I have a lot of deep tech customers that I'm close with, and they've been very successful raising multi-millions in government grants, and it seems like a pretty good deal to me. Oftentimes it's paired with VC. They'll use it ahead of a venture round. You have to be very careful with your accounting, obviously, but ahead of a VC round, it helps you get closer to the outcome that the venture markets are looking for. And from what I understand, it's fully non-dilutive. So as far as I'm concerned, it sounds like a pretty sweet deal.
I think there's a company in the most recent YC batch that is literally just like helping companies with grants. I forget.
It's definitely operationally intensive, from what I understand. So.
Yeah, you've got to weigh. I mean, it depends on how big the grant is and how much work is involved. I mean, there is a cost that's probably, in terms of the time taken, it can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So when you factor in, okay, it's $1 million grant, it's going to take us like $200K worth of work, and our probability is this, right, that the math may or may not work out. So you've got to kind of factor in what the opportunity cost is.
My only advice to you would just be, I don't know the problem you're working on, but like just trying to find the stakeholder that actually cares about it. Like I worked in this congressperson's office at one point. We had a huge immigrant community and had a whole staff around helping them navigate the immigration system. That's not true in every district, right? So just, and I'm sure for deep tech, like finding that constituent that cares about that, that'd be my only advice.
Just have your generative AI write the grants a lottery anyway. Just getting shots on goal. I think anything, like we did probably 70% government defense and intelligence. And the thing is on that is, I would say the biggest thing versus the commercial is the time. And you've almost got to run it as an independent process. And like, it's a nice portfolio addition to have in your thing, but it operates off a different time scale, and delays kick in, continuing resolutions and so on. You sort of can't control that. So I sort of say, like, here's your kind of like normal kind of thing, and then there's this over here. And if you've got a blend of that, just treat this one as a long-term investment that may pay off, and try and minimize the cost of accessing that investment, and just realize that your ability to forecast when it lands is going to be like very, very difficult. But if it does, you're in a good place. So I think that side of it's there. The other bit is actually much like, the SaaS business model is kind of like starting to be kind of unpacked and understood. Like selling to governments is going through that. There is actually patterns and things to do it that involve, getting appropriations and getting, buy-in from Congress and senators and like all of that dynamic that does like is repeatable, but we're still figuring that out as the Valley of how to actually do this. I would say in 5 years there'll be a bit more of a playbook, but realize at the moment that very few people have kind of like figured out that with any degree of certainty. So yeah.
Federal grants are scary though.
Especially if you're a Coke dealer.
I'm just saying, I'm just saying like.
On that
Awesome. Let's give them another round of applause. Thanks everybody for sticking around. And you guys want to hang out for a little bit? We have it until about 6 o'clock. So
Thank you for organizing.
yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.